Hello, everyone. Gonna let everybody kind of stream in. So give it a few minutes to let everybody know because I jumped on a little bit early. I'm gonna cut the stream just a little short and I wanna get through as much as possible today. Go ahead and share my screen. All right, some people are jumping on already. How are y'all doing today? I'm excited to go through this. I've actually wanted to go through the whole thing again since they came out with the new website. And I love how it's got this little warning here. This content is a work in progress and may be out of date. If you're learning Svelte, please refer to the tutorial on svelte.dev for now. If you're learning SvelteKit, refer to the SvelteKit docs. But I want to see how broken it is and if I can maybe help contribute to it in the future. So if I see some things, maybe I will be able to add to it at some point, which would be really cool. Trying to see if there's anything else I need to do before I jump in. Oh, that's what I was going to do. I am going to log on to YouTube under my name too, so I can type to chat under my name. Under my name too, and not play it back for everyone. So, all right, we have chat. I can type. My phone should not be on. Let's turn that off. And let's get started. All right. So this is learn.svelte.dev. This is the tutorial site that is in progress of being built. Right now, it gives you a warning. It tells you can go to the tutorial on svelte.dev, which actually looks basically the same with just some styling differences right now. But this is actually a SvelteKit application running in the browser, as far as I know, with the StackBlitz web containers technology, which is really awesome. So we have pop out. It's got different levels and you can go all the way to advanced SvelteKit. But I know if we go to this, it says to do. And when you go here, it says ignore me. So this part is not working yet, but we can start in the beginning and see how far we get. So I'm going to read through a lot of it. I would love to cut this into little short videos afterwards so people can go back and watch them and have kind of a pairing. So I'm going to be reading through and then I'm going to be completing the actual tutorial. So welcome to the Svelte tutorial. This will teach you everything you need to know to easily build fast, small web applications. You can also consult the API docs and the examples, or if you're impatient to start hacking on your machine locally, create a project with npm init svelte. And actually that is npm create svelte at next for now. And then hopefully once SvelteKit is 1.0, it will drop the at next. Maybe I should open something so I can take notes too. So what is Svelte? Svelte is a tool for building web applications. Like other user interface frameworks, it allows you to build your app declaratively out of components that combine markup, styles, and behaviors. These components are compiled into small, efficient JavaScript modules that eliminate overhead traditionally associated with UI frameworks. You can build your entire app with Svelte, for example, using an application framework like SvelteKit, or you can add it incrementally to an existing code base. You can also ship components as standalone packages that work anywhere. Most of us probably already knew that if you're watching this stream. I am opening up Notion here so I can take some notes, and I just want to make a note about the create. I know npm init svelte still works, but I would really like to just have the latest and greatest. I like the npm create svelte. Does everybody else like that? Just the flow of it sounds great. Notion is being a pain again today. I have had the biggest problems with Notion lately for some reason. It will just freeze on me, not load my pages, cut out stuff I had just typed. It has been really, really bad. So I'm going to put This is not Vercel. So the channel is sponsored by Vercel. I actually work for Netlify. So Netlify pays me. I'm a developer experience engineer. The channel does get money. They sponsor Kevin, who is the technical community builder for Svelte Society. So they sponsor him to do some of the work in the channel. But I work for Netlify. So we're all in this building the web together, and I won't be putting anything on Vercel today. So if you're not here for that, I'm sorry. Okay, so I'm going to make a note, npm create svelte instead of npm init svelte. How to use this tutorial. You'll need to have a basic familiarity with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to understand Svelte. And this is exactly how I explain it too. I'm giving a talk on Monday at Web Unleashed called Starting with Svelte. And I kind of go through this, how when I was a beginner, everything was pointing me towards React. And I got very confused by React, like having to put your HTML inside of a function and having to import something to declare some state. And those kinds of things were just, the mental model had me lost. And hey, Dominic. So I completely agree that if you have some basic familiarity with semantic HTML, with how the cascade flows in CSS, and some fundamental understanding of JavaScript, you don't even need that much. I think that you can learn a lot about JavaScript just inside of Svelte itself, which is amazing. This tutorial is split into 4 main parts, and it's got all the parts listed, and we showed a little bit earlier how the advanced Svelte kit part is still in the to-do stage and says ignore me, so we won't get that far today, but I do want to go through the Svelte part and see what we've got here. Each section will present an exercise designed to illustrate a feature. Later sections build on the knowledge gained in earlier ones, so it's recommended that you go from start to finish. If necessary, you can navigate via the menu above. If you get stuck, you can click the Solve button to the left of the editor. It's disabled on sections like this one that don't include an exercise. Try not to rely on it too much. You will learn faster by figuring out where to put each suggested code block and manually typing it into the editor. Next, your first component. In Svelte, an application is composed from one or more components. A component is a reusable, self-contained block of code that encapsulates HTML, CSS, and JavaScript that belong together, written in a .svelte file. The app.svelte file, open in the code editor to the right, is a single component. How do you make .env work in Svelte and Vite projects? I'm not covering that today, but I know that there's like an import.meta, and I think .env has worked. Do you mean in Svelte CSR land too? I think that may work a little bit differently than how SvelteKit handles environment variables, but I would maybe check out the docs at svelte.dev /svelte.dev/docs. Yeah, and find environment variables. Oh, it's not in there. Maybe that's why you... Is EMV in there? Environment. That's the only place in the environment. Maybe try Google. Maybe the docs don't tell you. That's interesting. Maybe that's something we should add to the docs. If you find out, maybe make an issue and tell on the Svelte repo how you solved it, and then maybe we can get that added to the docs, because I think that would be an important thing to have there. The docs are all, Svelte is all client-side rendered. The actual like Svelte compiler language is all client-side rendered. So environment variables would not be secure in that environment either. So you might just want to make sure that you're running the right kind of project and what you actually need. Adding data. A component that just renders some static markup isn't very interesting. Let's add some data. First, add a script tag to your component and declare a name variable. So we want to add the script tag up here. So we're going to go up to the top and add script, and it's going to break for now. Move my mouse out of the way. Script, close our tag, and then we want to do let name equals svelte. Then we can refer to the name in the markup. Do we need to save it to, oh wait, okay. And then we want to change world, I see, in the markup to name. There we go. So now it says hello spelt in our page. Inside the curly braces, we can put any JavaScript we want. Try changing name to name.uppercase. So name.to_uppercase. And we get an all uppercase svelte. So this is JavaScript inside of these curly braces. For a shoutier greeting. Next, dynamic attributes. You know what would be really nice to have on this too is Free Code Camp has this like test that it runs to see if you actually like completed this correctly. That would be really cool if we could add a test. I'm gonna make another little note, add test check code. That's the reason that I'm running through this. I know a lot about Svelte, so I'm probably going to know pretty much everything that it's going to teach me. Maybe I'll learn some new things too along the way, but I really want to see like how the tutorial is shaping up so that I can contribute back to it, add to it, give it some value. So I would love to contribute to that at some point. Dynamic attributes. Just like you can use curly braces to control text, you can use them to control element attributes. Our image is missing an SRC. Let's add one. So image here, we need to add an SRC attribute, and we want to make it equal to SRC. And for now, we can do that, and I'm sure it's going to tell us about the shorthand next. Ally, image element should have an alt attribute. So we get a compiler warning that I'm not actually seeing. Where is the compiler? Does it? Interesting. When building web apps, it's important to make sure that they're accessible to the broadest possible user base, including people with, for example, impaired vision or motion, or people without powerful hardware or good internet connections. Accessibility, shortened to Ally, isn't always easy to get right, but Svelte will help you by warning you if you write inaccessible markup. In this case, we're missing the alt attribute that describes the image for people using screen readers or people with slow or flaky internet connections that can't download the image. Let's add one. So we'll add an alt markup and a man dances. So now we have that. We can use curly braces inside attributes. Try changing it to name dances. So here, instead of a man, we'll make name dances. Oh, and that breaks. And remember to declare a name variable in Rick Astley. I don't even know if I'm spelling his name right, but Rick Astley dances. It's not uncommon to have an attribute where the name and value are the same, like SRC equal to SRC. Svelte gives us a convenient shorthand for these cases, so we can just shorten this to be SRC, and it takes care of that for us, which is one of my favorite things, which is such a small thing, but JSX makes you declare both, and it always drove me crazy. I'm like, it's the same thing. Just do it for me under the hood. Thank you, Ankit, for giving him that. I thought that's what it was, is import.meta.env, but you would have to look it up, I think, on the Vite docs. I tried to look that up too, but it's not in our documentation. So Cedric is saying this is for web apps, check DOM plus JS plus CSS, and that's about all you need to know. JetBrains has some good tutorials. Is that in regards to my comment earlier about just knowing like semantic HTML and CSS and JavaScript to get started with Svelte? Possibly. All right, now we're going to get into styling. So just like in HTML, you can add a style tag to your component. Let's add some styles to the P element. This is a paragraph style. Write your CSS here. So we want to take out this comment and we want to add P. Open some curly braces, not close them, and give it some styles. Color purple. Font family. Comic Sans. Really? and cursive, and font size of 2EM. I like using rims. So this is a paragraph in Comic Sans purple. Importantly, these rules are scoped to the component. You won't accidentally change the style of P elements elsewhere in your app, as you'll see, or as we'll see in the next step. So in nested components, when we have more than one component, it would be impractical to put your entire app in a single component. Instead, we can import components from other files and include them in our markup. Add a script tag that imports nested.svelte, which is here, nested.svelte, into the app component. So we're going to open a script tag and we're going to import nested from the same directory, nested.svelte, and then we will close our script tag. And include a nested component. So now down here under the paragraph, we want to include the nested component and self-closing. Notice that even though nested.svelte has a P element, the styles from app.svelte don't leak into it. So nested.svelte has a paragraph that says this is another paragraph in the black smaller text, and our paragraph in this component that we styled is styled with the correct styling, and they don't go between each other. They're scoped to the components. Component names are always capitalized to distinguish them from HTML elements. So we know that this is a component and this is a traditional HTML element. HTML tags is our next section. Ordinarily, strings are inserted as plain text, meaning that characters like less than and greater than have no special meaning. But sometimes you need to render HTML directly into a component. For example, the words you're reading right now exist in a markdown file that gets included on this page as a blob of HTML. Love that word, blob. In Svelte, you do this with the special @HTML tag. So instead of string here, we need to do @HTML string, and it will render the HTML for us. Svelte doesn't perform any sanitation of the expression inside of @HTML before it gets inserted into the DOM. In other words, if you use this feature, it's critical that you manually escape HTML that comes from sources you don't trust. Otherwise, you risk exposing your users to XSS attacks. Now we are going to assignments. At the heart of Svelte is a powerful system of reactivity for keeping the DOM in sync with your application state, for example, in response to an event. To demonstrate it, we first need to wire up an event handler. We'll learn more about these later. So we need a button, or we have a button, and we just need to add an on::click with the increment function called, which is here. We're going to run this function on click of the button. Inside the increment function, all we need to do is change the value of count. So instead of here, we need to do count. My mouse is so big that it just gets in the way all the time. Count plus equal to 1. And this assignment is important. That's how Svelte does its reactivity. Svelte instruments this assignment with some code that tells it the DOM will need to be updated. So now when we click the button, we increment our count. Svelte automatically updates the DOM when your component state changes. Often, some parts of the component state need to be computed from other parts, such as full name derived from a first name and a last name, and recomputed whenever they change. For these, we have reactive declarations. They look like this, where we have a $colon. Oh, I'm sorry. Probably should have done that before so we can zoom in. Okay. Now we have a $colon that declares a reactive declaration, and that creates this variable called doubled and makes sure that every time count changes that it will re-render. Don't worry if this looks a little alien. It's valid if unconventional JavaScript, which Svelte interprets to mean rerun this code whenever any of the reference values change. Once you get used to it, there's no going back. Let's use doubled in our markup. So first we actually need to create that. So we're going to $colon and we're going to create the doubled variable with count times 2. And then let's use doubled in our markup. In a p tag below the button, we will say count, the dynamic count value, doubled is, and then use the doubled value, and then close our p tag. And we can see 0 doubled is 0, 1 doubled is 2, 2 doubled is 4, and it just keeps going on and on and on and works. And each time count is updated, doubled is also updated correctly. Of course, you could just write count times 2 in the markup instead. You don't have to use reactive values. Reactive values become particularly valuable, no pun intended, when you need to reference them multiple times, or you have values that depend on other reactive values. Next is statements. We're not limited to declaring reactive values. We can also run arbitrary statements reactively. For example, we can log the value of count whenever it changes. So now count up here, we want to reactively say $:, we want to console log every single time count is, and this is a backtick string. We can get the variable of count displayed in the console. You can easily group statements together. Where is the console in this? Do you have to open? It's not here either, which is interesting. There it is. Okay, so it is in the console. Let's see if maybe I can put this back on the right side and make it a little smaller over there. So now we can see it's getting logged out every single time. You can easily group statements together with a block. So we can also put a block around this of curly braces, and then console log the count as count and give it an alert. Well, if I spell it correctly, backticks, I said the count is count. And that you can't capitalize because that is actually declaring or calling the variable. And now if we inspect, again, server-side rendering failed with HTTP status code. Interesting. Oh, I bet I can't do an alert in this. Is that a bug? Did we just find our first bug? I wonder if I change this to the console, if it'll work. Refresh. No. I'm going to cut that and then refresh the page and see. Oh, it cut the whole thing because it's obviously not saved. So we have $:, and then open, and then paste, and console.log. The count is count. Console. The button is not showing. Nothing is working anymore. I had two open parentheses. Oh, I see. Yeah, I do right here. But it's still not working. Did it work when I refreshed the page? No, it's not working at all. Something is breaking. We go back to the beginning. What were we on? Reactivity, statements. We still don't have the button. The button is not working at all. I'm going to try it in another browser. Bring this one over here. Wait, what just happened? Failed to start web container. It's something going on with web containers right now, I think. Okay. This one has welcome, but the button isn't showing. Yeah, there's like just something going on with the web containers right now. It doesn't have anything to do with the semicolons. Semicolons are optional in JavaScript. So I'm going to jump to the next one and see if we can get it working. They're all doing that. No. We were fine at the first one. So we went to welcome to Svelte, and this one was working. We were fine all the way through, and now none of them are working. So I wonder if web containers or Stacklets or however this is powered is having some issues. Which is perfect timing, right? Right when you want to use it, it's going to have some issues. Yeah, this isn't working either. Okay. You know what we're going to do? We're just going to go over to, I'm going to pivot and go to svelte.dev and pick up where we were since the web containers are having some issues. So we were at statements, and this is the same tutorial that it's walking through over there. So now we should be able to pick up where we left off, because now we've got our button working. Maybe I'll leave that page open so we can see if it actually starts working again. It says welcome, but that's not that right page. Interesting. I probably killed off the whole app because it's not working for you either. Well, I'm sorry that I killed the whole thing. I don't know what happened, but clearly it does say that it has bugs and it's not perfect. So we'll give them a break on that one. So subtitles, please. I do not know how to turn subtitles on. I don't think that's something I can do through StreamYard, and I think that's dictated by YouTube. And on live streams, I don't think you can have subtitles. So maybe once it processes the video after it goes past live and then processes it, there should be an option for us to add closed captioning at that point. But I'm sorry, unfortunately, I can't add it right now. Okay, so let's start over with this one. We're not limited to declaring reactive values. We can also run arbitrary statements reactively. For example, we can log the value of count whenever it changes. So we saw this first one. I'm going to copy this one just to avoid typing all of this again and putting, I just hit Control C. Yes, I'm on a Windows. And so this one, actually, the alert works. Maybe the alert just broke it. Like it was like, you cannot do an alert in the web container, and it just killed the whole thing. Right? You said that right at the same time I was saying it. It's not present on the server, so it can't access it in SSR, but it broke it for everyone because I did something in the tutorial. That seems like I'm going to add that as a thing. Did alert break the web container? I killed production, right? I shut the whole thing down. That's interesting. You can even put the $sign : in front of things like if blocks. So we could say if your count is greater than or equal to 10, alert take that out. The count is, well, it doesn't matter if it matches it exactly. So I'm just going to write the count is dangerously high and display the count. So we get to 10, and then we get count is dangerously high. Obsidian is a great Notion alternative. I have heard so many good things about Obsidian. I have downloaded it, but it's more, we use Notion at work, so I use it a lot for work. I use it for coding cat dev stuff, so I use Notion for pretty much everything. And to have a separate thing for my brain to go to, like I've tried to use it a couple of times, and I'll start and then I'll forget about it, and everything else lives in Notion. So I do agree that Obsidian is a good alternative, but I just can't get used to using it. Let's go next. We've got updating arrays and objects, and I think I need to zoom this one in a little bit too because it's probably a little too small. Svelte's reactivity is triggered by assignments. Methods that mutate arrays or objects will not trigger updates by themselves. In this example, clicking the Add a Number button calls the Add Number function, which appends a number to the array but doesn't trigger the recalculation of sum. One way to fix that is to assign numbers to itself to tell the compiler it has changed. So because we're using numbers.push here, when we add a number, this is actually getting numbers pushed to it, but we're not seeing the recalculation of that because Svelte's compiler doesn't know that it has changed. So we can do this two ways. One way is to fix that is to assign numbers to itself to tell the compiler it has changed. So numbers here, we would need to say numbers is equal to numbers, and this will actually make it show up. So now we're actually seeing the numbers. Or we could also concisely write ES6 syntax. And so we can say numbers is equal to open the array, spread the numbers array into that, and then say numbers.length, GTH plus 1. And now we can do that in one line rather than having two, which this is kind of the preferred syntax, but both work. So however you want to do it works. The same rule applies to array methods such as pop, shift, and splice, and to objects methods such as map.set, set.add, etc. Assignments to properties of arrays and objects, example object.foo plus equal to 1, or array of index I is equal to x, work the same way as assignments to the values themselves. I don't know about y'all, but the foo bar, whatever the other one is, blow my mind too. When I was learning and seeing those variables that like weren't actually words, it was just like, is this some like JavaScript magic? Or I didn't know what those meant. And I think it's one of those dev terms that we use. And once you're in the development space, you kind of like get used to it and you know what it is. But in the beginning, it was just so confusing to my brain to get used to it. And I still have trouble like reading statements that have those in it. So it looks like in the numbers, we're going to do numbers and give the index of numbers.length and then equal to numbers.length plus 1. Spell everything right? No, LENGTH. And then that works also. However, indirect assignments to references such as this, const foo equals object.foo, foo.bar. See, foo bar baz, that's what it is. Like foo.bar equals baz, or function, what is this word? Quokes thing.foo.bar equals baz. I am like babbling gibberish right now. Quokes object. I'll just drop these in and we'll see that. Wait, I think I need them. I mean, we're not going to see anything with that. Or this function. These don't really make sense to me. Won't trigger reactivity on object.foo.bar unless you follow it up with an object equal to object. A simple rule of thumb, the updated variable must directly appear on the left-hand side of an assignment. Assignment equals reactivity. So that's how I think of it. So far, we've dealt exclusively with internal state, talking about declaring props here. That is to say, the values are only accessible within a given component. So only one component can access these variables we've been declaring. In any real application, you'll need to pass data from one component down to its children. To do that, we need to declare properties, generally shortened to props in Svelte. We do that with the export keyword. Edit the nested.svelte component and add export to the variable answer. So now we have export let answer, and it's using it in a paragraph. The answer is answer, and then in app.svelte, Just like $:, this may feel a little weird at first. That's not how export normally works in JavaScript modules. Just roll with it for now. It'll soon become second nature. I actually like to think of it as kind of how JavaScript modules work, because if you export something, you can use it somewhere else. You don't have to import it, which is a little different, but I like to think of that model that way. And now the answer is 42 is showing up because we're passing in the property answer into this nested component. And if we change that value, it will change in the markup. Default values. We can easily specify default values for props in nested.svelte. So back in nested.svelte, export let answer equals a mystery. Ooh, a mystery. I can't spell that word. And if we now add a second component without an answer prop, it will fall back to the default. So we have answer equals 42. And then if we add a second nested, but don't pass it a prop, the answer is a mystery, which is the default value we set here. If you have an object of properties, you can spread them onto a component instead of specifying each one. I keep thinking I'm seeing something in the chat, but I'm not seeing if this is starting again. Refresh. Nope, still broken. I bet somebody has to go and like restart the server manually just because of me. That's fantastic. Okay. Spread props. We can spread the props. So we have an object with a bunch of properties here that we want to spread on. So instead of saying all of these different ones separately, we can actually just do spread syntax and then just say the name of the variable, and it will actually spread all of the props through, which is really nice. Conversely, if you need to reference all of the props that were passed into a component, including ones that weren't declared with export, you can do so by accessing $$ props directly. It's not generally recommended as it's difficult for Svelte to optimize, but it's useful in rare cases. $$ props. That's an object. So JSON.stringify. An empty object. What happens if I put it in info? Yeah, so we can see the props on this particular component out when we do that. If blocks. HTML doesn't have a way of expressing logic like conditionals and loops, but Svelte does. To conditionally render some markup, we wrap it in an if block. So in our markup, we've got two buttons, and we want to say on the first one, if the user dot logged in, means if it's true, we're going to render that button. And then hashtag if not user dot logged in. So now log in, log out, and they're conditionally rendered instead of having two buttons. Try it, update the component, and click on the buttons. Now, else blocks. Since the two conditions, if user.loggedin and if not user.loggedin, are mutually exclusive, we can simplify this component slightly by using an else block. So we can take this, and instead of saying if, we can just say colon else. And then it should do the same thing when we fix all of our, oh wait, I put it in the wrong spot. Go back to that one. And then this is the one that I actually need to change here. So this one will say colon else. And so now it says log in, else log out. A hashtag character always indicates a block opening tag. So this opens the block. A slash character always indicates a block closing tag, so this character. And a colon character, as in the colon else, indicates a block continuation tag. Don't worry, you've already learned almost all the syntax Svelte adds to the HTML. Now we're going to do an else if block. Multiple conditions can be chained together with else if. So if x is greater than 10, this will be displayed. Else here we want to say if 5 is greater than x. and take this block out. Else if we just need one closing tag. So if x is greater than 10, then it will render x is greater than 10. Else if 5 is greater than x, then it will render x is less than 5. Or if none of those above are true, it will render x is between 5 and 10. So 7 is between 5 and 10 because x is equal to 7, but we can see it as 10. Oh, I need to make it greater than. So 11 is greater than 10 is rendering now. And then if we made it less than 5, so 4 is less than 5, and those render correctly. Each blocks. If you need to loop over a list of data, use an each block. This is what I was looking for in this too. No server listening on port. So the server is dead. It killed the server. I was looking for that kind of feedback that we have in our REPLs and things with these warnings. I had to open the console in this. I noticed that too, which is an interesting difference. So if you need to loop over a list of data, use an each block. So we have an array of objects called cats. And then down in the UL here, we want to open an each block with the hashtag each cats as cat. I love how declarative and it reads just like plain English to me. That also helps my brain. One of my qualms with JSX is that a lot of the times for like especially conditionals and like looping over arrays in JSX, you need to use JavaScript. So you're like flipping from like HTML markup to JavaScript, and my brain just needs to like constantly flip back and forth. But this is just English, and then I'm reading the markup, and it is a lot easier for me to understand. And then we close the block with /each, and now we're iterating over every single object in the array by using cat.name and cat.id in the YouTube watch video, so we can actually open these and see keyboard cat. I hope. Well, there's an ad, of course, with the cat in it, which was perfect. So good job, YouTube. The expression cats in this case can be an array, any array or array-like object, i.e. it has a length property. You can loop over generic iterables with each ... iterable. So spread iterable as the index. So if we did this, is that what that's saying? Iterable? No, I don't think that works. I don't know what that's saying. Expression cats in this case can be an array or array-like object. It has a length property. You can loop over generic iterables with each. Oh. ... cat. Nope. 12, 16. Yeah, it's broken here. If I try that, you can get the current index as a second argument like so. Oh, so yeah, so we can do cats as cat and then comma to get the index. And then we can say down here, I plus 1 colon cat name. And so now we have like each one with an index on it. If you prefer, you can use destructuring each cats as, and here we could destructure ID and name and replace cat.id with just ID and cat.name with just name, which is another popular way to do it. And we can, now we don't have the index though. So here we should just use ID. Nope. Can we do the index? No. Oh yeah, we can. Okay. Security anchor with target equals underscore blank should have relationship attribute containing the value. No refer. This is hilarious because on the Svelte Siren site, try ... cats. Oh, and okay, so I was just saying it wrong. Let's see. ... cats. No, that doesn't work either. I'm not sure what it's saying there. But on the Svelte Siren site the other day, I kept getting this warning in the compiler, and I pasted it to some of my other co-founders, and I was like, what is wrong here? Like I was showing where I was spelling it, and I had a typo. I was spelling no refer wrong. So I will probably never do that again, but it's the rel attribute and it's no refer. Does that work? And now if I fix this, cats as, where do I have it? ID and name and then comma I. And now that fixed it. And now I have no compiler warning. So no refer. All right. Keyed each block. By default, when you modify the value of an each block, it will add and remove items at the end of the block and update any values that have changed. That might not be what you want. It's easier to show why than to explain. Click the remove first thing button a few times. So it's taking them off the top. And notice what happens. It does not remove the first thing component. So what is our first thing component? Our first thing is an apple. Oh, and they're wrong. So this is not an egg. This is not a donut. Oh, you would still, so Ion was saying this works, hashtag each, and then you do cats, and then you destructure off of it. So yeah, let's show that working. So down here, oh, we've got to add all of that. So each, and we said ... cats, and then as destructure ID and name, and take these off. You will attempted to close. We need an each. Yeah, so that worked. That's how we use that syntax. Okay. I was very confused by that. I've never used that syntax before. Transforming an iterable object into an array, you think? Yeah, I think maybe. Okay, so back to what we were saying with keyed each block. So right now, none of these, well, these match up, but nothing is staying matched up. Once we remove one, we're getting things confused. So now all of these names moved up, but none of these did. So we're getting confusion in our state management. So we modified the value of an each block, but we are not keeping them in sync. It's easier to show why than to explain. Click the remove first thing and notice what happens. It does not remove the first thing component, but rather the last DOM node. Then it updates the name value in the remaining DOM nodes, but not the emoji. Instead, we'd like to remove only the first thing component and its DOM node and leave the others unaffected. To do that, we specify a unique identifier or key for the each block. So in our each things as thing, we need a thing.id as our ID and thing.name, and now they should work appropriately. So it gives it an ID for it to attach each thing to so that it will keep them in sync. Here, thing.id is the key, which tells Svelte how to figure out which DOM node to change when the component updates. You can use any object as the key, as Svelte uses a map internally. In other words, you could do thing instead of thing.id. Using a string or number is generally safer, however, since it means identity persists without referential equality. For example, when updating with a fresh data from an API server. Await blocks. Most web applications have to deal with asynchronous data at some point. Svelte makes it easy to await the value of promises directly in your markup. So we have a response function up here, if return text, else throw error, let promise, get random number. And so we have generate random number as an on-click with a handle click function. And then we're going to replace this element here with an hashtag await to open an await block, the promise. And then we're going to have a p tag that says waiting. Oh, I need to hide that now. And do that. And then colon, then the number. And we'll get the number is number. and then catch. What's colon catch? If there's an error, take key, style equals color red, and we'll display the error dot message key. And then we need to close the await block. He attempted to close an element 33.0. Oh, this does not need to be down there. And now we're waiting, and then we get the number, and then we can generate another number. We're going waiting, number, and I don't think we'll ever hit that block unless we just say throw new error. And then if we do that, we're getting an error in the red with the number, which is interesting. Okay. So now we'll go to DOM events. As we've briefly seen already, you can listen to any event on an element with an on colon directive. So we had on colon clicks before, now we have a div, and we want to add an on mouse move event equal to our function that we have declared above called handle mouse move. And we do not need to call it and put the E in. That is done automatically, the event in here. So all of that is declared, and now when we move our mouse, on the canvas, we actually get the value of where our mouse is located. You can also declare event handlers inline. So instead of writing this function up here, we could say down here, E, and then an arrow function, M equal to, all these letters are confusing, E.client X. So E stands for event here, and E.client Y. And then we should still see the same effect. The quote marks are optional, but they're helpful for syntax highlighting in some environments. So I don't have the quote marks, but you can add the quote marks around the entire, not two, just one, around the entire statement. And it will give some syntax highlighting in some environments, as it said. In some frameworks, you may see recommendations to avoid inline event handlers for performance reasons, particularly inside of loops. That advice doesn't apply to Svelte. The compiler will always do the right thing, whichever form you choose. So this is the same to Svelte as what we had before with the handle event. Event modifiers. DOM event handlers can have modifiers that alter their behavior. For example, a handler with a once modifier will only run a single time. So now instead of on colon click, we want to add a modifier, which is the pipe once, and then handle click will only work one time. So we did click, we clicked OK, and now we can't fire that alert again. It modified this on click to only go one time and then removed the event listener. The full list of modifiers are prevent default. So if you're preventing a form, you can do the pipe prevent default to automatically prevent it from submitting before running the handler. Useful for client-side form handling, for example. Stop propagation for calls, event.stop propagation, preventing the event reaching the next element. Passive, improve scrolling performance on touch wheel events. Svelte will add it automatically where it's safe to do so. Non-passive, explicitly set passive to false. Capture fires the handler during the capture phase instead of the bubbling phase, and shows the MDN docs on that. Once, remove the handler after the first time it runs. Self only trigger handler if event.target is the element itself. Trusted only trigger handler if event.isTrusted is true. For example, if the event is triggered by a user action. You can chain modifiers together. For example, once, we could also say capture equals, I don't think that was actually telling me to do that. Like we could just continue chaining them together, I think is basically what that was saying. So, oh wait, or maybe it was saying to just do something there. No, it's not. But you can chain all of the modifiers together. Okay, next. Components can also dispatch events. To do so, they must create an event dispatcher. Update inner.svelte, so inner.svelte, right here. Setup code goes here. And import create event dispatcher from Svelte. And then we're going to say const dispatch equals create. I wish there was some like auto populating here so I could just hit tab and it would just do it for me. And then there's function say hello, and in the function we want to call that dispatch that we just created and give it a message. And the message is hello. And then on click to say hello. And we get the alert. And here is where we're calling that. So on message, so we're saying on click of the button that is in this, we're firing that say hello function, but we're doing it through the event handler. Create event dispatcher must be called when the component is first instantiated. You can't do it later inside a set timeout callback. This links dispatch to the component instance. Notice that the app component is listening to the messages dispatched by inner component thanks to the on:\message directive. This directive is an attribute prefixed with on: followed by the event name that we are dispatching, in this case, message. So we're basically creating our own custom event. Without this attribute, messages would still be dispatched, but the app would not react to it. You can try removing the on: message attribute and pressing the button again. So removing the attribute. So remove the whole thing and press the button again, and we don't get the alert that we got before. You can also try changing the event name to something else. For instance, change dispatch message to dispatch my event. And now over in this, I'm going to undo that and say my event, and it should still work. There we go. So it corresponds to whatever you call it in this dispatch right here. Event forwarding. Unlike DOM events, component events don't bubble. If you want to listen to an event on some deeply nested component, the intermediate components must forward the event. In this case, we have the same app.svelte and inner.svelte as in the previous chapter, but there's now an outer.svelte component that contains the inner component. One way we could solve the problem is adding create event dispatcher to outer.svelte, listening for the message event and creating a handler for it. So in which file are we in? So here's our event dispatcher that we created in the last one, and then import inner. And now we want to, in the outer component, import the create event dispatcher from Svelte. And we want to const dispatch is equal create event dispatcher. And we want a function called forward with an event. I'm just going to shorten that and dispatch a message or whatever you want to call it of e.detail. And inner here is on: message to fire the one from this. This is like inception of dispatchers. So we have a dispatch in the inner component that says say hello. We're firing that. That's firing another dispatch message, which is really interesting. But that's a lot of code to write and really like messes with your brain. So Svelte gives us an equivalent shorthand. An on: message event directive without a value means forward all message events. So down here, and then we don't need to do any of this. We can just do it again, and it will just work magically because Svelte does all of that behind the scenes for us, which is really nice. So I am coming up on an hour of streaming. I think I'm going to stop here. I'm going to make a note that I'm on DOM event forwarding. And I've got 3 things already in my list of things for the web containers once it's back up. Maybe we can figure out what is going on with this and why it is crashing on us now. We think that I might have killed the server. So I'm going to stop there though. And thank you everybody for joining. I hope somebody got some value out of this, and I hope eventually I'll be able to break all of these into little short videos so that you will have a corresponding video to go with the tutorial if you want to watch that. So thank you everybody, and I will see you next time. Bye.